In this creator series interview here on Studio Live today, I'm talking to a creator about creating indie pop music, mixing, mastering, releasing your music. Please welcome to Studio Live today, Douglas Witmer. How are you doing today, Douglas?
Hi.
It's great to have you. I've been in touch with you for a while now. I've listened to your song a long time ago. You've been producing this great music, and yeah, we want to get to know a little bit about you and what I like to call the musical origin story. So why don't you let folks know a little bit about your background? What got you into this caper?
Sure. Well, I came from a singing family, I'd say, and as a kid, and grew up singing mostly in church, and then had a really good music teacher in school as an elementary school child. And by 7th, 8th grade, I was trying to make music, and I have a memory of writing a piece that I tried to perform at like a 8th grade music festival or something. And so that's kind of the first time I wrote music that I can remember. And then by high school, it was learning guitar and, getting together with a friend and starting to record, of course, on cassettes at that point. And we had no gear. We just had, in fact, I think the first microphone we used was one half of a set of Walkman headphones that was dropped down into the sound hole of my friend's acoustic guitar. And into probably his parents' regular tape deck. It wasn't even a 4-track, So we had really serious about my band in high school. And then we ended up recording 2 full lengths in high school on cassette. And then just kind of kept making music through college and onward. And I've never sort of stopped.
Very cool, and I love that. If you're too young to remember the boom recording to a boombox days, the fact that headphones can be microphones, they're just the reverse. Like I love that, and I did very similar things back in the 90s, and it sounds like we had a fairly similar sort of upbringing.
Yeah.
In terms of that. Importantly, what was your band name? Like high school and college band names always fascinating.
Yeah. Okay. So the high school band is called Landscape Paperweight.
There you go.
Yeah, and you can YouTube it. That we reunited in Philadelphia almost 20 years later and played a short set of our high school songs in the club, and had a great time. And those videos are on YouTube. So
wow,
yeah,
that is cool. We will. I will hassle you after, and I'll get a link to that and throw it down. I know people love watching things like that, and I must reunite with my high school band at some stage and do similar because it's so fun. The retro stuff is new again now, so that's pretty cool. So growing up singing, learning to play the guitar, I'm assuming wanting to be a rock star like most of us were back in the early days. What transition us to where you are now and what you're doing now with music? What got you to the point now where you're like, yeah, I'm going to produce music and start actually releasing music?
Right. So I would say that I've been creating music all along, much slower. I mean, GarageBand, when it came out for the Mac back in the mid 2000s, was like a big deal. The reason I actually bought a Mac was because I could have GarageBand. So I knew that software, and I was doing music on my Mac, but it kind of dropped off a little bit for me. And then when I got an iPad several years ago and realized I could do all of this on the iPad, I was like kind of blown away. And then I met the person I collaborate with, Krista, who's a singer and a songwriter. And she and my tastes kind of, we have different tastes, but we have this overlap of taste, and it was interesting and fun. And it took pressure off me to actually write songs entirely. Much of the time she comes with something, and I can play producer, I can play all these other roles. It's really fun. And I like the studio element side of things much more than the live element side of things. So yeah, that became like a natural fit for the two of us.
Very cool, and yeah, thanks for raising that, because I did mean to mention that at the very start. So yes, your band Oviette with Krista, you've released one single at this stage, which if folks want to check out, there are links down in the description of the video. You can check it out on YouTube, Spotify, all the different places. So you've got your song out there. That's called "Talk to the Mountain." And I was saying before the pre-show that I woke up the other morning humming a tune to myself, and I'm like, I've got no idea what this tune is. And then it got to the sort of chorus bit, and I'm like, oh, that's the song. That's Douglas's song. So that's always very cool. You've definitely got yourself an earworm when you've got other people humming your songs to themselves.
That's
so
awesome. Yeah,
very, very cool. And so what's in the works at the moment? So you've got other projects that you're working on. What can folks, if they do go and start following you, what's coming next? What's on the agenda?
Right. So, well, right now I'm working on mixing our next single, which is called "Yeah, Yeah, Yeah," and you've heard the preview for that. So that's coming out hopefully next week. We also have, we have a full album worth of material at various stages right now. Some of it's close to complete. Some of it's just starting out. But we've been writing for about 2 years. So our goal is this spring to bring those singles out, maybe get like an EP in the next 6 to 8 weeks of material, and then, by summer have it all out as a record, as a full length.
Very cool. And I love that. I know that singles are the thing now, and I know that albums, like I talk to people and say, I want to do another album, and they're like, why are you doing albums? Singles are where it's at now. But I don't know, maybe it's from my old school way, but just having that whole end to end, 10 plus songs all in one album, it's just very cool. So
yeah, we're sort of like trying to navigate that for ourselves too, because we're of the album generation as well. And but also, I don't know, I think we're just kind of doing both. We're just putting the songs out, and then we'll kind of collect them eventually, I think, as an album.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what I recommend to folks, because I think, and we'll talk about the creation process in a moment, I think people can get quite overwhelmed. People come to me and they say, Pete, I want to do an album, but I'm stuck on like song 3. And I'm like, well, maybe do an EP to start with, or maybe do a single to start with, or maybe do a 30-second demo of a song to start with. I think starting small is the right way to go. And like you say, you can build up to a whole album by releasing 10 singles. You've got an album. And you've got all the learning along the way, because I think sharing your music, getting feedback, you're going to get better as you go, and you're going to get better than doing 10 songs, putting out an album and not having anyone listen to anything and give any feedback. So that's a very cool way to go. Hello to the folks who are here live, by the way. We are streaming live to YouTube. So if you do have questions for Douglas, throw in some curveballs and put him on the spot. No, all good questions, but hello to the folks. We've got Mashai here, Jade's here, Undefined Music, Pradeep, John, Imagine 6, Alex. Hello to you all. Hope you're doing well. Let's move on and start talking about the actual recording process here. So what is it? You talked GarageBand. You said you've got a Mac basically to use GarageBand. You're now using GarageBand in iOS as well. What's your sort of workflow look like in terms of you sitting down to record a song?
Yeah. So now I'm only using GarageBand on my iPad and sometimes on the phone. So my desktop Mac is not in my house anymore, and it's very out of date. So it doesn't sync anymore. That was revolutionary, having the iPad, and finding out how much and how far you could go with it, in the process. And actually, that's partly how I interfaced with your channel to begin with, because I was just trying to figure out, can I master, and that's where I came to Studio Live today and found out about Final Touch via your videos. It's these questions, can I do this? Can I do that? And turns out, yeah, you can. It's kind of amazing, especially for someone like me who started on cassette tapes. So it's just mind blowing. So what I do, I tend to work, I'm sitting in the room where I normally record most things. I'm a guitarist mostly. I play drums as well. I play bass as well, and I sing. And in the recording that we have, in our recordings, I am everything. I am the band. And we are getting ready to play a live show soon, and we've gotten some friends to play bass and drums for us. But on the recordings, I'm everything. So in my room here, which is sort of my living room, I guess you could say, it's where I have a small amp and I have an interface and have a really small MIDI keyboard, and I will track almost everything except for drums and vocals up here. sometimes I track vocals up here at night when the street's quiet, because the sunlight you're seeing on my face is the windows to the street. And then down in my basement, I have my drum kit, and I do vocals down there as well, where it's much quieter.
Very cool. Yeah, and that, I love that, and I love hearing that as well. Obviously, not because I'm a bit biased, but I love GarageBand and I love mobile recording. But yeah, the great thing about that is if you've got a home studio setup, you can literally record every instrument in a different room of the house if you want to, and wherever you're going to be more comfortable and get the best sound is kind of where you go. And because you can pick up your interface and your iPad and your iPhone and just put it wherever you need it. I find it great. I mean, I've got my studio set up in the corner here, but I'm often over on that blue couch because I'm more comfortable. And if I'm just playing a riff, I'll just go, oh, I really want to record that. And within about 3 minutes, I can have my interface plugged into my iPad and be sitting on that couch recording. So
it's fantastic. I mean, particularly when I'm playing drums, I have the iPad sitting, right beside me. And I have a 4-channel interface downstairs where I have the drum mics coming into that, and I'm monitoring, sitting there, engineering and recording and performing the drums.
Isn't that? And that's just ridiculous. I know
it is ridiculous.
People freak out when I first say, because they think that with an iPhone or iPad, they're like, oh, well, that's nice for you. You can record with the built-in mic there, or maybe you can plug in some special lightning mic. And I'm like, no, I use a Steinberg UART44. I can push 6 channels and record 6 channels at once. And then they're just like, what? But they can't be good quality. Oh, yeah, no, there's 44.1, 24-bit. And yeah, it blows people away that is a thing. And especially for those of us of a certain age where we played around with 4-track recorders and were blown away when the very first 8-track digital recorder, we're like, it's recording to a hard drive. Like, from there to come to where we are now is kind of ridiculous. So good job embracing it and doing it. And I think for those that are considering this and they're like, oh, I really want to start creating music, it is so simple to get started. You don't need a difficult, complicated setup. You just need to get started, and then you can build and grow as you go, as you have done, and start producing great music, which is what you're actually putting out there in the world.
Yeah. And honestly, we have one song that's not out yet, but I may keep the vocal track that I recorded straight into the built-in mic on the iPad. It was supposed to be a scratch take, but it sounds fine, honestly. So not in the single that's out, but another song that we have.
Yeah, and that is also a great point. I'm doing a live show after this one in about an hour's time where I'm recording a demo of my song, and I'll probably do things like use the built-in mic. But that's a really good tip. So if you're going to take away some tips from this show today, that's a good one. Don't make your scratch recording terrible. Like, don't go out of your way to make it bad. It may not end up in your final mix, but more often than you'd believe, my scratch guitars, my scratch vocals have ended up in the final mix because you try to recreate that, but there's something about the first time you lay something down, you've got the energy and you've got the passion, and sometimes you can't recapture that, and you're just going to go with a slightly lesser recording because it's all about what the end result's going to be. So I love that. Excellent. So in terms of the gear, so you talked about using an iPad, using GarageBand and using an interface there. What about sort of instruments? So you've got drums, guitars, any other sort of hardware gear that you go to that you use in your process?
Yeah, nothing I have is especially high end. I mean, I have some decent stuff. I would say my nicest piece of gear is I do have a vintage 78 Fender tube amplifier that I like the way it sounds a lot. Yeah. So when I can mic that up nicely, I like that. I like the way it sounds. I'm not a purist about that kind of stuff, but it just sounds good to me. But I often I also use I use Multi-Effects Floor Modeler as well. And I prefer using that over built-in amp stuff in GarageBand because it's just I like to be able to have the knobs on the amp modeler on my modeling pedals versus the built-in stuff. It's just easier for me to adjust. That's my one big gripe about working in iOS is the inexact quality of your fingers rubbing sometimes I use a stylus, but it's just
Yeah, no, 100%. And you might have seen, and folks watching the channel here might have seen, I've been using a mouse with a lot of my tutorials lately, and I've kind of fallen that, which people think is a bit weird. They're like, you've got a touch screen. The whole point is to use the touch screen and you're using a mouse. But yeah, I've found the same things, and especially adjusting. Like, yeah, I feel your pain with the knobs and the dials and just trying to get, I want a 1 dB boost. And you're like, whoop, that was 17. And you're like, oh, now I've got down 17. And it's, yeah, as opposed to you just, that little finite thing like, yep, that's the tone I want.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you.
So yeah, for instance, like today, I'm working on just really dialing this mix in for this new song, and I have 1 or 2 seconds where I've actually retuned my vocals just a couple cents, where a phrase where I just didn't quite hit a note, and so it's a separate track, but they need to be EQ'd exactly. Because the tuning, the auto tune is on the second of those 2 tracks, but they need to be tuned or EQ'd exactly. All the plugins need to be exact, and that's very difficult to hit with your finger.
Yeah, that is, and in fact, yeah, that's something that I struggle with, and I've started using a method for that exact thing, because I do the same thing. I've got 1 track where I want to automate an effect on, so you add the second track, and then you're trying to go, oh, I've got to get the compressor and the EQ and everything exact. You make 1 slight adjustment to your main vocal track, you got to go, oh, now I've got to go and change it. Well, I tend to just duplicate out that original track and then shift the audio. So I'm in this constant phase of duplicate, move, delete, duplicate, move, delete, because every time I change the first one, like you, I don't want to go there with the fine tooth comb trying to get it exactly right. So
yeah, well, then you forget which ones you've duplicated and which ones you haven't.
Exactly. Yeah. We do a whole half an hour on track labeling and naming conventions, and I'm terrible. Like I'm gonna do what I say, not what I do. Because if you look at my tracks, they're messy. Very, very cool. In terms of the software side, then, so using GarageBand, do you use many plugins? Are there other things that you bring in, other apps or things that you use on your tracks? You mentioned Final Touch for mastering. In the recording or the mixing phase, any go-to plugins or things that you like to use?
No, honestly, the only plugins that I've installed are a few of the free ones that have been on your channel, such as, I think a while back you had like 5 free plugins. One was the LRC5 EQ, which is really useful, and the Rough Rider compression. I use those 2 quite a bit in things because I find them really, really nicely laid out, easy to use for what I need to do. Otherwise, I just use the built-in stuff, or I record wet for guitars. I've always recorded wet. Like the people who and I don't even know if that's a thing, like recording wet versus dry, but the concept from the analog days of recording and putting the effects on after you have the dry signal. I never subscribed to that. I always recorded my guitars with tons of delay and reverb straight into the tape. So that's just the way I work.
Yeah, and it's a topic we could spend another entire show on, but I've gone the same way, because when I first got back into recording, I was like, hey, I've got the absolute control here to record everything dry and then just add whatever effects I want afterwards. And I tried it and it sounded terrible, because when you're playing, especially playing guitar or singing vocals is the same sort of thing, you are actually engaging. Well, part of the instrument is actually the effect. So for a guitar, if you're just getting that clean guitar tone that doesn't have any energy and any life to it, you're not going to get the same performance as if you're putting it through your Fender tube amp with your delay and your chorus and whatever else you're putting on your guitar. So I'm the same. Obviously, if you don't have the hardware, latency is what sort of creates the issues for some people. So you're trying to play it. If you're playing an intricate part, you can have that micro few milliseconds of latency, and that can throw you off. So I know some people record dry because of that. But yeah, I'm the same these days. I'm like, get it right at the source, dial your tone in, and it makes mixing so much easier. People say, oh, I just spent 3 weeks mixing my song. How long does it take you? And I say, usually about 3 or 4 hours, because you've mixed on the way in, you've got your tone right, then there's not actually that much to do. You're basically balancing levels at that point.
Yeah.
Like, not a whole lot to do.
Yeah, I think sometimes, and I've said this, I'm also a visual artist, and sometimes when I speak to students, I say sometimes, you have, when you think you have a lot of options, that can be a little bit crippling, because you are crippled by the amount of options that you have. And sometimes great ideas come from just solving problems, and doing workarounds or working within limitations, and so you come up with a solution or something, or you have an idea, or you move forward because of the limitations that you're given. And I think I resonate with what you're saying, Pete. Like I just I just have a sound that I like, and that's the sound that I'm going to like. And I'm not going to worry about whether there's another sound I might like better. Maybe I will some other time, but for that time. And this is actually what's interesting is now that we're preparing our songs to play live, they're coming out different than the way they sound on the recordings. And so we're dealing, like Krista and I are talking about this right now, like how much, and it's kind of interesting too, to see how the songs are being reinterpreted now in a much different way than they sound in the recording, because we just have other sets of limitations.
Yeah, it is. It's always interesting. And I get caught in this the other way around, is that I write songs on an acoustic guitar and a single vocal, and then I try to turn them into a song, and they always end up sounding like an acoustic guitar and a vocal. So trying to turn that to a full band mix is hard. And if you're going the other way, I can imagine it's its own set of challenges, going from more of a full band mix to something that you can perform live. And obviously if you have a drummer and a bass player as well, but you know what it's like when you're, especially guitarists, we tend to like to layer up and get that wall of sound. And I've got 7 guitar tracks here to get this one sound that I want. That can be quite hard to reproduce live. So it's a fun problem to have, though, to work around.
Yes.
So we've got some folks here. We've got some love for the LRC5. So Lil Feely saying that, yes, loving the LRC5 there. I've got Andy here. Hi to all. Great advice, Pete. EQ is always a pain in the butt. Need to learn more about this. Yeah, and again, we could spend a lot of time talking EQ. The main thing is, and what I say to people when they're starting with EQ is, don't forget, EQ is just a volume knob for a different frequency. So if as soon as you get that concept in your head, all you're doing is turning up and down the volume of your bass, your mids, and your treble. And that's it. So people have these mystified explanations of EQ and what you can and can't do with it. And the other thing, again, not to get into the advice show because we're talking about your music, but only EQ things when you need to. And I think what we're talking about before of getting your sound right at the source, it's often you don't need much of anything. If
a little goes a long way.
100%. See,
yeah,
this is why I have guests like you on, Douglas, because I say these things that take a minute and then you just go, a little goes a long way. And I'm like, yes, correct. Rightio, we've got a few more questions here. Once again, if folks are here live, if you've got questions for Douglas, please throw them there. If you're watching on the replay, don't worry. We love you just as much. You've got an opportunity to throw comments, and I'll be down there after the show. So if you're watching on the replay, leave your comment there. Myself and Douglas will be able to read that and respond to you there. So what... since you've been starting creating music, I mean, you released a single, so I'm assuming that's right up there. But what I like to ask is, what's your proudest moment so far in your music making journey? What is the one thing that stands out to you as like, yeah, that's that moment when I look back, I go, I'm super proud of that?
You gave me this question a couple of days ago to think about, and I still don't quite have a good answer for that question. But I'm going to say this: it's not my proudest moment, but it's I'll tell you what one of the best feelings for me is, and that is. I love to be in other places with my headphones on and listening to my own music. That's just so. Recently, I had a trip, and I was on a train in Germany, and I was listening to my own music on Spotify, and I just love that. Just made me feel so great. So, and the fact that we can do it,
I love that answer. And and I've talked about this a few times to people that are thinking about releasing. And I honestly think, like, some people might think that sounds, because I listen to a lot of my own music too, like all the time. And people will often say, I feel really bad about listening to my own music. I feel like it's ego. I feel like I've got a big head. And if people heard me listening to my own music, the thing is, if you're creating music that you don't rock out to, that you don't appreciate and enjoy, then you're doing something seriously wrong. So you should be listening to your music more than any other music, because what your music is your taste, your everything that you like about music combined together and pushed out into something that you're hopefully proud of. So yeah, that's a great answer there, and I love it.
Yeah, and I think, it's also different for everyone. There are artists who I know, and people I know personally, who once they get it out, they're done. That their relationship with it is over at that point, and they don't, making it was the thing, and maybe performing it if they have to tour with it or something like that. But yeah, for me, I live with my songs, and that's part of what gives me life, not just mine. So I don't think, I don't worry about the ego part of it. I can see how people would, but also, since I'm a visual artist too, and I'm living with work that I make, and so on, that's all. I'm always evaluating all those things as part of a creative life.
Yeah, and I love it. It's funny. I was listening to a podcast, a show just this morning about marketing because I'm a nerd and I like this sort of thing. But yeah, they were talking about very sort of similar concepts of if you do something like these. And again, I watch back to these interviews and these shows usually once. Sometimes it's cringy because if you're listening, watching your own face, like I don't know. But yeah, I try to force myself to do it because when you're producing it, you are the producer of the art. And then if you can flip that around and become a consumer of the art, then you can actually see through other people's eyes. And then if you're asking feedback, you know what people are talking about. So I think that, like you say, it's not for everyone. And this part 2 of that is probably whatever workflow works for you, whatever you want to do with your own music is the right thing for you. There is no like best practices. You should do this. You shouldn't do this. It's all about what works for you and helps you create your best music.
Sure.
Cool. So we're coming towards the end. I know it does fly by when we're doing these. Mobile Metal here saying, yes, I love listening to my music. And again, you definitely should be listening to your own music, or you should be at least liking your own music. And I know that there's reasons why you'd produce music that perhaps you don't enjoy if it's a commercial thing or you're producing pop music or you're producing other artists. But if it's your music, it's great if you can actually enjoy that. So there's been a lot of information and advice you've given here. And for folks that are just starting their journey, like we were back in the tape days, way back when, what I like to ask is for the best piece of advice that you would have for someone who is just starting out or who's maybe feeling nervous about either getting back into music or into recording their music. What would you say to someone in that situation?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm thinking about when I first was making music, with my friends and within the days of tape, there was really no possibility for anybody to hear it except for you and maybe your close circle, your 10 or 15, 20 friends, unless you were really, like a bigger artist, let's say. And so in some ways that's crippling because why do it if no one's going to hear it? On the other hand, that's great because you can do it and the stakes are so not low, but what I mean to say is that you just have this opportunity to do something for yourself that is great, and you've done it, and no one's going to judge you for it, and no one's going to but now you have both options. You can do it for yourself, and if you really like what you got, you can just, it goes out there like to everybody, and it's available in a way that never would have been before, and that's kind of interesting and kind of amazing. I think even though we have all these digital options and all these ways of making stuff be perfect and great and dialing everything in, I'm still learning that, like, for me, things are still coming down to the performance, like especially the vocal performance. So my piece of advice, especially for singers, is when you're going to go for the vocal, just make sure you're feeling it. Like, do it when you're feeling great. Like, know what you're going to do, or just feel the moment and do it a bunch of times and then think about it later, because for pop music, I really feel like the vocal is gonna make or break the song.
Yeah, 100%. The vocals and the performance, and having a good song performed well, I think is highly underrated, and a lot of focus. And if you listen, and we're talking with the pre-show here, if you're watching tutorials and you're listening to people talk, there's so much focus on how do you mix, what is the right compressor settings, how do you EQ a vocal. Mm-hmm. There's very little about how do you get a passionate performance, how do you make sure that you've written a good song that is going to connect with people, because that is generally what music is about. Yes, you can really admire a really nicely EQ'd guitar sound and go, wow, the way that they got that top end to just really pop was good. But your average listener is not even caring about that. They don't care how many tracks you use. They don't care what plugins you used or what software you used. They're like, does this song rock? Does it make me feel a certain way? Does it make me laugh, cry, whatever emotion you're going for? So
yeah, I mean, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's the thing. It's for me right now is great because I'm blessed to work with a singer, Krista. I have to give her a shout out. I mean, she's just a natural singer. I said somewhere, I said the best way to record Krista is by putting a microphone in front of her. That's there's nothing special. I just record her, and she sounds good because she's a great singer.
Yeah, exactly, and it's the old get it right at the source. So Joe Gilder, who is one of my sort of early mentors in the whole home recording thing, that's his catchphrase, and it's as true today as it was 10 years ago. It's get it right at the source. It's going to make your life a lot easier. The fix it in the mix is not a thing, and the fixing the vocals afterwards is not a thing if it's not good to begin with. So yes, and it's a good segue to let you know that yes. So Krista and Douglas, their band Oviette, make sure you check them out. There are links. I've got the song whip link down there. So wherever you listen to music, Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, Deezer, I don't care. All of those will be linked down there. You can go and check out the single, and then be ready when your new single. No pressure, but any plan? When can we expect the new single to be out from Oviette?
I'm hoping to finish the mastering over the weekend, and then I use Lander for masters, and then and distribution. So if anyone's interested about that, I do use Lander, and hopefully it'll be up sometime this coming week.
Very cool. Well, definitely looking forward to that. I want to say thank you. It's been fascinating. It's always
my pleasure.
To learn people's process is so cool, and to just delve in and nerd out on music for 30 minutes is always cool. I hope those watching here live have enjoyed it. If you are watching and catching up on the replay, I hope you enjoy it as well. Make sure you leave any comments, any questions that you have about the process. Yeah, we only just touched on the distribution, so if you've got questions about Lander and distribution for Douglas, leave those there. If you did get some value out of this today, if you found it interesting, fascinating, or somewhere in between, hit the like button. That just tells me that I should continue to talk to fabulous folks like Douglas here on the channel. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. Thank you to you again, Douglas.
Thank you, Pete. Your channel's fantastic.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, my friend. And until next time, we will see you on the next Creator Series interview. Cheers, folks.